Thanks for clicking on to the Friday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. We're going to take a little look at the snow cover, not just for UK, Ireland, but also Europe and the Northern Hemisphere as a whole, in fact, globally. And also, we're going to look at the polar vortex and a little bit of long range in today's video as well. There will be a bonus video, by the way, later on this afternoon, looking specifically at some of the cold temperatures that we've got going, both recorded during the course of this morning and potential through tonight, as well as a little look at the upcoming weekend as well. So plenty of reason to stick around here on the channel. If you're enjoying the content, be sure to hit the like button and also hit that subscribe button as well. This is a visible satellite imagery captured yesterday. Credit to NOAA, in fact, no, NASA. And you can see here that we do have some very, very nice snow cover across central and north Wales. Really, from about the Midlands northwards, we've got the generally snow-covered ground away from the immediate coast, and even Scotland, as well as across the Irish and North Channel. We're seeing some snow across a good part of Ireland and northern portions of Northern Ireland, southern portions of Southern Ireland. So obviously it's no 2013 or 2010 by any stretch, but nonetheless we are seeing some reasonably decent snow-covered ground out there. And then if you look specifically at Scotland, as well as England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, we've got a reasonable snow cover. This is Scotland zoomed in, so a healthy covering across the southern portions of Scotland, a little bit through the central belt, and then really once you get north of the South Highlands, we've got a decent amount of coverage here. Looking at England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, we also have a reasonable amount away from the far south. We do have some areas, higher elevations of southern England, that has still visible snow on the ground, and obviously with clear skies, light winds, we're seeing the temperatures falling away to the coldest values in a few years. More on that later on, and even parts of Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland, we're seeing reasonable coverage of snow. But we do have a lot going on at the moment here. In terms of snow cover across Europe, you can see here this is off weather.us, and there is depicting the snow-covered ground across parts of the UK as well as Ireland here. This is specifically Ireland and England as well as Wales. Even the near continent picking up on some fairly healthy snow cover as well, as can be seen here. So obviously, as you would expect in the approach to the middle portions of both January and meteorological winter, we've got coverage across the entirety of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and into Western Russia. But we've got a little strip here really stretching from the north of Paris over the far north of France, across Belgium, northern portions of Germany, and into the north of Poland. We've got the heaviest and deepest amounts of snow, as well as that across parts of high ground Central Europe into the Balkan region as well. But it's generally been warmer than average here, so we've not got as much as what you would typically expect to see. Moving on then, and we can see that we've got just bear with me a little second, and I'll get to the right charts. This is so here we go. So this is actually looking at the entire northern, in fact, the entire planet, and the northern hemisphere is looking not too bad. If you notice, we do have a little bit of a further north extent of snow over both Europe and Asia, but nonetheless there is a fairly decent blanket of reflective snow cover across Eurasia in areas that you would typically expect it. I think it is a little bit further north over China than you would typically expect to see. And then as you move into Europe here, not a huge amount, but nonetheless it's a decent coverage. And really the UK and Ireland is doing not too bad actually, given recent years anyway. And over the North American continent, we've got a decent amount of snow over northern United States and across the vast majority of Canada. Looking specifically in at the Eurasian landmass, and you can see here, as I said, we've got the snow cover probably a little bit further north over China. We've got a little bit of a lack of snow over Mongolia, which is quite interesting. Much of Kazakhstan covered in snow. Obviously Russia, the vast majority of the Russian land area is covered. Norway, Sweden, Finland, yeah, as you would expect, and then there is a little strip. We've actually got a little bit more snow here through Europe, I think, than what that graphic is depicting. I might be wrong in that, but yeah, it's not looking too bad in terms of the healthiness of the snow cover. Moving on to the stratosphere, then we've got a lot of things going on at the moment here. I've obviously alluded to the fact that we're warming things up across Europe, and eventually we're going to see the entire UK and Ireland back in the southwesterly winds. It's going to be a slower process for England and Wales, quicker across particularly western Scotland during the course of Sunday. There's going to be quite a contrast, I think, between this upcoming Saturday and Sunday. Temperatures still close to freezing throughout much of Saturday. By the time we reach Sunday, we could be pushing into upper single figures. By Monday, low double figures will be the case, and then we're going to start to see pretty strong. That's courtesy, by the way, of southwesterly winds, but we're going to start to see that warmer air getting mixed further south as well. Looking at the GFS, then, in fact, let's have a quick look before we show this. Let's have a quick look at some of the temperatures, both of 30 millibars as well as 10 millibars. You can see here, the grey line is the climatological average. This is off JMA, by the way, and we've generally been, slightly warmer than average during the autumn season, as can be seen here. So the black line here essentially is showing you where the core temperature of 30 millibars has been over the North Pole, and going from warmer than average through part of September, October, and then really the turnaround came during the month of November, and then really from then we've remained colder than average at 30 millibars. Looking at the 10 millibar level, and you can see here similar story, warmer than average back to colder than average, and that has been the mainstay of the winter so far in terms of the core of the polar vortex remaining pretty strong actually. Now, the polar vortex in the lower portion of the atmosphere, when you take the entire column as one, the lower portions of the atmosphere has been weaker in terms of the polar vortex, but it's been strengthening within the upper levels, really anywhere from 10 millibars down to about 70 millibars. But what we're seeing is we're going to start to see a coupling of the stratospheric polar vortex along with the tropospheric polar vortex, and when both start to couple and tighten up, you generally have the Arctic oscillation becoming quite firmly positive. That means that we're bundling the cold up into the Arctic region. We should start to see milder conditions flood the middle altitude pattern. That being said, however, we do have a legacy of this weak stratospheric into tropospheric polar vortex lingering over the eastern side of North America. So we're going to have that kind of cold pool remaining in place through the majority of the rest of January over eastern North America. But generally, western areas of Europe is going to be quite the opposite, where we see the mild conditions really kind of start to take over, I think. But once you start to see the strengthening of the polar vortex within the stratosphere, then start to descend into the tropospheric level and then tighten things up, there's only really one. There's really only one outcome, to be quite honest with you, and that is a strengthening of the Arctic oscillation back into positive territory. And you can see that here quite clearly with this graphic. Firmly negative at the moment here. We are starting to see the recovery, and it is expected, according to the GFS, to go positive as we move towards the middle portions of January here. Looking at the North Atlantic oscillation, it too slightly slower, but nonetheless is starting to recover back towards positive into the second half of January. And this is, in some respects, a consequence of a few things, including the Magellan oscillation, which is strengthening in what is still considered the cold phases. But what I think is going to happen, and the reasons why I think this January is going to largely remain milder or on the milder side of average as we progress through the second half of this month, with no real return of major cold, is the fact that the MJO is rotating through the Indian Ocean. So that's basically going to rotate into and across the Indian Ocean basin, and then eventually it may end up in phases 4 and 5. This kind of reinforces A potential for storminess as we move towards the latter half of the month would not surprise me, especially if we can get into an amplified phase 3. That can trigger stormier conditions across Western Europe, especially if you've got colder over Eastern North America. So anyway, let's have a quick look at the on the face of it, GFS 10 millibar temperature profile. You can see the strong warming taking place over the Eurasian side of the pole. We've got the core of the polar vortex leaning towards North America, and we have seen a bit of cross polar flow in recent times, driving Arctic into the eastern side of North America, bringing all sorts of winteriness here. And we obviously remain cold at the moment, but this pattern is very much on its way out for us here on the eastern side of the North Atlantic. But play through the loop here, interesting stuff. You can see here the very strong warming continuing. We've got this kind of almost drag from the polar vortex. As that warming crosses Asia, it's actually pulling the core of the polar vortex out of North America and across Greenland into the northern half of Europe here. And with that coupled PV, you would start to expect to see lower heights coming down over Greenland to the north of the UK and Ireland, with higher pressure to the south. Southwesterly flow would be the name of the game for us in Western Europe here. But I want to show you this here. This is really caught my attention. Look at the core temperature of the polar vortex as it moves into early next week here. So this is as that warming continues to spread its way across Asia, out into the North Pacific, and then into northwestern North America. This could, with that coupled PV, reinforce Arctic into eastern side of North America. But when you've got that core of the PV over the North Atlantic and much of Europe, you tend to find lower heights underneath this core of high pressure, this core of cold, should I say, at 10 millibars, and therefore I would expect to see a much more active Atlantic pattern as we progress through the next couple of weeks. But it's the core of the polar vortex at 10 millibars, which is really quite incredible. The GFS model, by the way, has the core temperature minus 104 Celsius, almost over Northern Europe by the time we reach next Thursday, 16th of January. That is quite an extreme map in itself, and really quite incredible, actually. I don't know if I've ever seen the GFS or any model for that matter indicating a core temperature at 10 millibars of minus 100 Celsius. So I remember back with the PV of Doom back a few years ago, especially with an Indian Ocean dipole, which may have been driving that strengthening polar vortex. I'm sure we reached close to minus 100, but just shy of it. And that was record breaking for the end of December. So it'll be interesting to see if this has any sort of merit. It would be interesting to see if this is kind of record breaking territory. But if you look at the mean zonal winds, you can see that we're basically seeing the mean. This is obviously the difference is you've got the actual core of the polar vortex. That's one indicator of how strong or weak the PV is. But the mean zonal wind surrounding those winds surrounding the polar vortex is another aspect that represents weakness or strength in the polar vortex. And you can see here this sharp dip at the moment here towards mid-month. We see this sharp deceleration and then acceleration of winds back towards record territory by the time we reach Thursday the 23rd of January here. So this would certainly coincide with one another. The ECMWF is obviously one model, GFS is another, but it's interesting how it's showing an acceleration of the mean zonal winds towards record territory. That's obviously the ensemble mean, which means it's the average of all the members run together, and the average of all those members are indicating record strong polar stratospheric winds at 10 millibars, which is pretty amazing stuff actually. So this kind of reinforces the overall idea that we're going to start to drive a milder theme. Looking at the lower portions of the stratosphere, 50 millibars, you can see here a lot of cold temperatures at this level, and anchored bang slap over the pole here. We've got this warming taking place across Eurasia towards the North Pacific, As we look out a week from now, you can see here that that warming is progressing out of Asia and into the eastern side of western side of North America. Sorry, but we continue to have that core of the PV at 50 millibars centered over Greenland and the Eurasian side of the pole. Continue to look out 10 days from now, and again, you can see here that we've got this strong warming showing up here. This could be something worth paying a little bit of attention to. The amount of blocking at 50 millibars is quite noteworthy, actually, when you look out 10 days from now. And obviously, we need to pay attention to the behavior of the Magellan Oscillation. Where does it go over the next 10 to 15 days? And whatnot. So this is all the different aspects that I'm looking at, building the ideas. It's not just a case I look at each individual model and almost kind of take your pick at what you want, whether you want mild, whether you want cold. I know there is people unfortunately out there that do that, but I'm looking at the much more complex drivers that can give you an indication long way down the road in terms of what type of weather pattern we're looking at. At the moment, for the potentially for the foreseeable future anyway, it looks as if it's going to remain reasonably mobile in terms of the weather pattern. That means that we're likely to see more westerly flow, Atlantic driven weather into western areas of Europe here. But it's again, I want to emphasize the point, I'm not necessarily writing winter off, but this is the model here of the ECMWF extended for the next 30 days. Thursday, 9th of January through Saturday, the 8th of February. We've got low heights extending off North America. We've also got low heights over Greenland. We've got positive heights over Western Europe. That certainly would be mild. If we look at the temperatures for the same 30-day period, they are indicating that we've got slightly warmer than average, nothing mega. Let's look at Europe specifically, and you can see here it's actually indicating average conditions over the UK and warmer than average across Ireland, but near average across the heart of the UK. But I think generally speaking, this would be overall a fairly mild situation here. So that's that. Let's go back and see what the GFS extended is looking like for the same time frame. So 30 days coming up, and let's have a look at the pressure in the upper levels first. This is obviously a full 30-day period. So again, fluctuation in between, but generally the ECM and the GFS are very much in bed with one another in terms of this trough over the western side of the North Atlantic and ridge over the eastern side of the North Atlantic, including UK and Ireland here. In terms of the European view, you can see here quite a strong anticyclonic look to that period between Thursday, 9th of January and Saturday, the 8th of February. And then temperature wise, it's looking like this here. But we will look specifically at week by week in the coming days to come. But I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Again, we've still got the second half of winter to go. Not necessarily thrown in the towel, but nonetheless, it looks as if the polar vortex is coupled. It's strengthening. It looks as if the MJO is rotating back in towards a more stormier, Atlantic-driven, and somewhat milder phases as well. So there is a lot of reason to believe that this cold spell is ending, and there is nothing necessarily showing up, at least for the next couple of weeks anyway. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Back again with the live stream tomorrow at 4 p.m. I will leave a link in the description below today's video. And also check out the brief here and now video that will be released. It'll either be ahead of this video or it'll be after this video. I'm not entirely sure just yet. But stay tuned, and I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.